Welcome to The Connector, where we connect North Carolina to ideas and North Carolinians to each other. This podcast series is from the Institute for Emerging Issues at North Carolina State University. And now to the conversation.
My name is Katherine Helms, and I'm the Hunt Intern for the 2024-2025 school year. I am a junior at NC State, majoring in political science, minoring in statistics. I am a swimmer at NC State, and I'm also on the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. I am the Civic Engagement Chair for PAC United, which is a civic engagement group on campus. Today, we'll be diving into the critical topic of urban planning, exploring how innovative strategies can address challenges like sustainable development and climate resilience. II Interns chose this topic because of its direct relevance to the 2025 Emerging Issues Forum. Urban planning and energy are deeply connected. This topic appeals to students from diverse disciplines, such as architecture, engineering, environmental science, and social sciences. Our discussion will highlight how experts are shaping the cities of tomorrow. I'm honored to introduce our panel of esteemed experts, Mr. Mitchell Silver, Ms. Dr. Kofi Boone, and Mr. Jason Hardin. To start, I'd like to ask each of you to share a bit about yourselves and what you do, and how it connects to urban planning.
Well, I'll start. I'll do the Reader's Digest version. I've been an urban planner for about 40 years. Started my work in New York City, had an undergraduate degree in architecture, but I discovered planning in college and went on to get my master's. My entire career has been in urban planning, working in the city of Raleigh, Washington, D.C., and of course, New York City. And then I was very excited back in 2014, I was appointed commissioner for New York City Parks and got to run the greatest park system in the world. In between that, I served as president of the American Planning Association that allowed me to travel the world and see how planning is done not just in the US, but across the planet. And in terms of my focus, both in planning and parks, around the 1980s, we recognized that we had to take care of our planet. It wasn't just about buildings, and really started to embed more natural environment, sustainability into the work that we do. As Parks Commissioner, it was very important. We didn't just look at our parks as a green system that is for people to just exercise, but a vital way of how we can help to nurture, protect our environment. So both planning and sustainability has been woven into my career probably for the last 30 years.
Awesome, thank you. Moving on to you, Dr. Boone.
Yeah, I teach landscape architecture and environmental planning at NC State. I've been at NC State about 20 years. Prior to that, I practiced at a private firm known as Smith Group that was based in Michigan, working on large public projects and working on a lot of community engaged design. So helping people who don't have the technical skill sets that we have participate positively in positive change in their communities. I'm from the city of Detroit, Michigan. And so it was really the condition of the city that got me interested in this topic more broadly, and learning that there were professions that were charged with leading and helping people to develop those places, particularly the importance of the environment and outdoor spaces is the reason why I got involved. So I spent most of my days thinking about and working with communities across the state to try and solve environmental problems. We'll talk more about equity and justice, I think, through the talk, but it was an eye-opener to me and to other people that we don't all experience the world the same. And we have different issues and needs, and our professions are able to address those through urban planning and other strategies.
Awesome, thank you. And you, Mr. Hardin, if you could tell us what you do and how it relates to urban planning.
Yes, so I'm Jason Hardin, and I work with the City of Raleigh's Office of Sustainability. And I think when a lot of people think about the word sustainability, the first things that come to mind are things like open space, solar panels, electric vehicles, and those can all be really important parts of sustainability. But I come at the topic more from an urban planning perspective and from the perspective of how can the city itself, how we move around, the kind of places that we build, the kind of places that we gather, or the kind of places that we set up that don't facilitate gathering, are sustainable elements in and of themselves. I came to this from a previous career as a journalist, as a newspaper reporter, and specifically working in Charleston, South Carolina. They had some, I think, really inventive, bold planners at the time, and a lot of what they worked on wasn't the historic district downtown, which is dense and mixed use and walkable and very sustainable. A lot of what they were thinking about is the idea of retrofitting suburbia to try and create more connected walkable social places. And I found that so incredibly eye-opening that we could take a landscape and it could evolve over time to be something more sustainable. That inspired me so much that I, along with some layoffs in the newspaper industry, decided to shift careers and ended up as an urban planner, which I served in that role for several years with the city of Raleigh before switching for the last few years to the Office of Sustainability, where I do work on things like solar and EVs, but a lot of our work is thinking about the bones of the city and how can that be more inherently sustainable.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to move on to our question portion. And if you don't have something to, we can move down the line, or if you want to skip that question, that's okay too. But what role does education and community engagement play in promoting sustainable urban living, and how can students get involved? Because we really want to, convey that this is an important topic for them to be engaged in. Anyone want to start?
Well, I first want to underscore public engagement. And the key word about engagement is that word engagement. It's connecting with the community. It is bi-directional. And it's important that when we have conversation with the community, people want to be heard. And it's important that we don't just talk, but we listen, because you hear the stories, you hear how people experience space and place. So we have to take that word public engagement very seriously. If we don't respect the stories and the people, I tell people it's best just to stay in the office and write papers and create maps. It is a sacred oath to actually engage a community. So I always communicate to students or professionals, you must embrace that role very seriously, because it's a contract. We want something from you, and in return, we should give you something back. Don't just have a plan or a conversation just to say thank you very much. There should be an obligation to give something back in return. And in terms of education, a lot of people, when you engage in students in particular, education's critical, because you kind of have to understand what I say is the full vision or arc of what we're doing. That's a hindsight. Understand what happened. Insight, what is happening today, and then foresight, where is this going tomorrow? To me, that's fully understanding the entire issue. Sustainability had an arc. There were reasons as we were growing as a planet and using up our resources, including our planet, kind of recognize that we had to do something. The way we were planning and building was not sustainable. And then what about now? What are the issues we have to deal with? They're not the same as the 1980s. And then what about the 2040 if we keep these patterns going forward? So it was important to be educated and to learn about these issues so you can have that engagement to really help be those guardians, those protectors, those healers of both present and also future generations. So both are equally important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this in the classroom a lot. I mean, we're facing a lot of challenges and crises almost on a daily basis that deal with the environment and growth and with cities. And there's a little bit of, there's passion, but there's also a bit of impatience. Like people want to get out there and they want to make a change immediately. And the scale of change that we're talking about is going to take a long period of time, but your years in college are a great way to get engaged with issues and start to build those habits that you can take with you for the rest of your life. So, when I was in your shoes, when I was in college, full of passion, no skill, right? So on the balance, I was, interested in a lot of different things, but didn't know what to do about it, didn't understand how processes worked and decisions worked. And what helped was getting off campus and actually observing how things happened and how change occurred. So the ability to go and sit in at a city council meeting and hear Mitch talk about particular issues related to the city or from a sustainability standpoint, to see different stages, how decisions are made, to follow how they're funded, who participates. So before you even participate, sometimes it's a good time to kind of sit and observe and see how different processes of change happen and start to inform yourself about that broader process. If you live on campus or in your community, you're already in a community. And so I have a daughter in college now, and we talk quite a bit about it, like how can that environment be a place where you start to build these habits? How do you get to know your neighbors? How do you get to know your setting? How can you start to observe things and see how things are changing? How do you figure out, who your next door neighbor is? And if you need help, kind of build, some relationships, such that simple things like knowing who to call in case of emergency to big things, that there's something that you need help with. So in some cases, we think of community as something that's out there, right? And that's something that's very complicated. But we can start to build those habits now with one another and in the setting that we're in. So I think, use your educational time as a way to observe, to study, And then as you start to learn more, start to target those skill sets that you think are best for you. For me, it was, had some aptitudes with regards to graphics, to design, to thinking spatially. And so that led me towards, a design career. But in some cases, it's going to be policy. In some cases, it's going to be economics. In some cases, it's going to be other areas. But it takes a while to kind of match it with what you think your passion is and to build sort of that ladder that leads you to the skill set where you can make an impact later on.
Thank you.
I love the input that we get from students, and that's whether it's college students or elementary, middle, high school students. We've tried to do, and we need to do a better job of reaching more people where they are, and that includes students. And the reason why I love that is we hear different things from people in that age group than we hear from older people. And I think that makes sense. If you think about how we live, it changes over the course of our life. And we know for sure that it's that perspective of students is underrepresented kind of in what we're in the conversation overall. There's different transportation preferences, there's different housing needs and housing preferences. And if we don't hear that, and again, it's a lot of that is on the public input process to make sure that we're really engaging people. But if we don't hear that, we're gonna get a different result than if we do hear that. So it's really important to get that. And I would say, if anybody wonders, well, would anybody listen to me? I'm just a student. The answer is absolutely yes. I've observed that officials really want to get that perspective and very much appreciate it. And then quickly on the education part of this question, there's a couple ways I look at that. One is our office puts out a lot of education on things that you can do to live a more sustainable life. Here's resources for installing solar on your house or apartment building or your business, or EV charging, how to make it more energy efficient, and that's really important. But the other part of it is providing some perspective into that outreach and decision-making process. There's trade-offs involved in these choices that we make, and it's really important that those are brought to light. And a lot of that has to do with the basic building blocks of a city. We have tended to spread outward over the last several decades rather than grow in a more dense and connected way. And those choices have different environmental impacts and lots of other different impacts. And that's not to say that there's a right choice, but that those choices ought to be made. And when we're discussing them with the community, that they ought to be informed by those kind of trade-offs involved in the choices that we make.
Awesome, thank you. And going off of that, looking ahead, what emerging trends or technologies in sustainable urban design excite you the most, and how might they reshape our cities in the coming decades?
Well, the first one, because I just came back from a conference in Denver, and the one that artificial intelligence is something that's going to change how we do our work, is going to change our society. We don't know, because there are some uses that will benefit society and there are some that will actually create harm. So artificial intelligence across the board is something that we need to watch. What I'm most excited about, and I had this opportunity as Parks Commissioner, to really look at the built environment in a very different way. Before I got there, people looked at parks as wonderful green spaces, but it served multiple purposes. We can't have density without open space. They go together. People thrive, they live in the public realm. You may eat and sleep in your apartment, but you're gonna thrive in the public realm and public space. So we looked at our parks very differently. It's the first line of defense against climate change. In terms of trees, clean air, clean water, it cools the planet. In terms of stormwater capture and retention. So when you look at parks, it has an economic driver. There are social gathering places. Depending on your city, it could be your front yard, your backyard, your outdoor living room. So just looking at cities and their green spaces, we can use it to help us sustain how we live. And a lot of sustainability principles can happen right there, not just in parks, but in our green spaces and open spaces. So to me, that is such an important way we're going to live in the future. People looking very carefully at tree canopy for many reasons, not just because of all the pollen we're getting right now, but for all the benefits that it serves in terms of capturing carbon dioxide and giving us back better oxygen. So to me, I think the future is going to double down even more on making sure we value our public spaces, we value our green spaces, we value our open spaces, and to me, that's the best way of tackling, or as I said, being the first line of defense against climate change. That is a trend I'm excited for, and I think it will grow over time.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that nature-based solutions and the idea that when we think about nature, we don't often think about it as technology. But there was a time before cities. There was a time before human settlements. And over thousands and millions of years, a lot of the things around us that aren't human beings evolved to deal with a lot of different things. And so sometimes we think that human-made technology is superior to technology that evolved. You know, the classic example being, designing a storm sewer, to catch water and move it, when that's why there are wetlands and there are streams and there are creeks, or air purification, when that's why there are trees and there are plants. They all do the same sort of thing. So to echo what Mitch is saying, the ability to think about nature not just as a luxury or as leisure, but nature as a part of the infrastructure of a city, that it's a living infrastructure that provides all of what we call secondary benefits, ranging from human health and well-being to habitat to climate prevention, urban heat island effect, a lot of those things. If we deploy that in the right way, it's important. I think one that's important also that in our region is important, and we really haven't overcome that yet, is mobility. It's the reality that because of economics and because of a lot of other factors, a lot of people can't live close to where they work or live close to where they get their daily needs, and so they got to move. And how much of our cities are given up to cars and to fossil fuels and independent mobility, and how our cities would be radically different if we had other more robust forms of transportation that could interlock and connect with one another. And we had the opportunity in the past to take a major leap forward, wasn't unable to do it, but there are innovations that are coming that can start to attack that. When we start to think about all the parts of our cities that are paved, all the parts of cities are about the storage and movement of cars, that could become other things if we thought about other ways of moving from place to place. So those technologies are really important that we keep focusing on.
So you probably could have said this at any point since the onset of the Industrial Revolution, but the next few decades are going to be incredibly interesting, and interesting can be good or bad, right? There's a lot that's coming. Buildings are getting smarter. Talk about AI. Solar panels are getting much cheaper and easier. There's a lot of good things. There's also some trends that are gonna have some impacts we're gonna need to wrestle with. Automated vehicles are much closer. I think for a long time it felt like that technology that's always 5 years out. Well, if you get a cab now or an Uber in San Francisco or some other cities, it's probably not gonna have a driver in it. And I think we're a lot closer to that becoming a scalable technology in Raleigh than we're really thinking. It's a lot of impacts on how much we travel and what our cities look like. But probably more than anything, the thing that excites me the most is less of a technology and more of what I see, especially when we do outreach, as a hunger for social connections. I think we've reached a point where we've kind of gone as far as we can with spreading out and feeling disconnected. And you see the implications of that manifest in a number of different ways. I personally think it has something to do with the tone of our political discourse and the polarization. I know we've heard a lot over the last few decades about fewer people joining clubs or organizations, and we just frayed those social ties. And a lot of that is physical, and physical connected places where people can connect. A third place, a coffee shop, a restaurant, they depend on having people nearby. You don't want to have a hassle to have to drive for 15 minutes to get to that place to have something social. So building our cities in a way that's more inherently social, that's what I hear the demand for. And from a sustainability perspective, the same kind of cities that are socially connected are also environmentally sustainable.
Thank you. And I know we talked a lot about, community engagement and people connecting. But if you had to give advice to students, how can students from diverse fields contribute to creating more sustainable cities?
Well, you're going to hear from us that sustainability is not a siloed profession. It transects so many other disciplines. So regardless of the work you're doing, an engineer, an artist, an architect, a landscape architect, you have a role in advancing sustainability because it's really about sustaining our planet. So from my perspective, there is a way, regardless of what profession you're in, to contribute. But I think it's very important that you have to understand the outcome. Back then when sustainability started, there were the 3 Ps and the 3 Es. There was the economy, equity and the environment. There was people, prosperity, and planet. But just to understand that we play a role in help this planet or environment stay as the best it could be. There's a concern over time that decisions, and I'm very concerned about what's happening right now, just not in the United States, but other planets, that we that are making these decisions won't inherit these problems and crises. The next generation will. So you have a vested interest to fight for your future, regardless of what profession you're in, because these decisions will affect you. We have one planet. It's a finite resource. We can't grow another planet. And so you have a vested interest for yourself, for your future, for your children and grandchildren's future, that we really have to fight to make sure that this resource is protected, because this is interesting, and I'll just say this, when we look at the different generations, they call the greatest generation the greatest because they were able to give their today for our tomorrow. And right now, we have this administration that wants to give away your tomorrow for our today. We have to reverse that and bring back the aspirations of the greatest generation. So regardless of what profession or major you're pursuing, you all have a vested interest to be like the greatest generation and be willing to give up your today for the next generation's tomorrow. And in some cases, you're going to have to fight for it. Use your innovation, use your intelligence to make sure that we have a planet, because it's worth saving.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to engagement, I mean, I think that in some cases what people are thinking about are engaging people different from themselves, jumping into a pressing challenge and like rapidly getting in there, learning as fast as you can and contributing as soon as possible. And I'm gonna be honest with you, that's not how engagement works. So part of what you can do now as young people and as students is to learn how to operate within your own communities and learn how to do them with empathy, with foresight, as Mitch referenced, with evidence, right, to be critical, and to create sort of a pattern of long-term engagement where there are incremental improvements, small steps towards a bigger goal. One of the best pieces of advice I got as a student was to join an organization and participate. And the mandate was given to us, didn't care which organization it was, just join one. And get first-person experience with what it takes to develop visions and goals, to collaborate and organize with people that are different from you, to learn from failures, to celebrate wins, to measure progress, to do all those things. And so I think this time is a perfect time to be able to learn those skills so that when you are out, you know, really in the world, you have a real world lived experience with dealing with it. A lot of community engagement, quite frankly, is failure. Not getting what you want, not being able to build consensus. And that's an important thing to learn to deal with as well, so that when you do have a breakthrough, you do have a moment that you can really celebrate it and develop it. But it's really hard to do that in real time when you don't have that experience. And so one of the values of the college environment and the college experience is that it's a good place to fail. You should fail frequently. You should take lots of risks and learn from them, because there's a big safety net underneath you right now, the academic safety net. When you get out into the real world, the consequences of success and failure are much bigger. So this is the perfect time to do that, to reach out to one another, to find an organization that you're passionate about. If it doesn't exist, start it and get those repetitions in. Learn what it takes to talk about shaping the vision and mission. Learn what it takes about to advocate for your position. Learn what it takes about to build consensus with people that are different from you, and to attract resources and affect change, so that you can replicate it and escalate it when you get out of here.
When I talk to college students, one thing I hear a lot is, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to make the world a more sustainable place. Should I major in sustainability or environmental science? And how can I get a job? What does the field of sustainability look like in terms of job opportunity? And what I say is, try to look at it through a broader lens. And honestly, my really frank advice is, don't necessarily major in one of those fields, and don't necessarily plan on going into an office of sustainability. Look at engineering, look at transportation planning, look at transportation engineering, look at electrical engineering. Think about the decisions that get made that affect sustainability. It's not necessarily the Office of Sustainability, it's NCDOT, it's Duke Energy. And that is your ability, that's your opportunity to make an impact on a scale that sometimes really goes beyond what we can do at the city level. A lot of what we do sometimes is asking entities like Duke to do more, to shift their generation mix to be a little bit more clean. But if you're in that boardroom, if you're in their planning group, that's your opportunity from the inside to help make some of those decisions to shift towards a more sustainable transportation system, a more sustainable energy generation system. So I would say take some classes, major in it if you like, make sure you know some of the key principles, but don't limit yourself to just that narrow field because as the other folks up here have said, almost all of our jobs to some degree or another have sustainability embedded in them. And so look for the opportunity within those fields to bring that out.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives. Now we're going to hear from some of our students.
Hi, I'm Jenny Browne. I'm the Community Initiatives Intern here at IEI, and we tabled a tally to get student questions about sustainable urban planning, and here's that portion introducing the questions to our speakers.
Taking a poll around campus, more students would like to know about affordable housing and public transportation. What's your take on those two things as it pertains to urban planning and sustainable cities?
Well, it's a great question. And I think the students should know that there's direct connection between housing and transportation. I'll put affordable just in this little bucket right now for a second. If you look at throughout the world, the two of them are connected. If you have more transportation, like a subway or a train system, it allows you to have more density. More density allows you to have more housing options and affordable choices. If you don't have a transit system and it's just relying on cars, you tend to have a lower density pattern and you need more land to accommodate the growth. So there's a connection. People do believe if you have more density and transportation, you don't need to own a car. That's a huge savings. In some cases, it could be 20 to 30% of your income. You can put more of that money into housing. And so to answer the question, there is definitely a connection between land use and transportation, and housing is probably the largest of the land use categories. And so you're spot on. If you want more affordability, you're going to need more density, and you're going to need a robust transportation system. And when I mean transportation, let's just say mobility, because it's beyond just transportation. Now people are using e-bikes and biking and walking and running. So in terms of the mobility spectrum, there's a lot more choices, but the more options you have, the more density you have, housing will be more affordable if you take that approach. If you want me to answer specifically what's happened in the city of Raleigh, the taxpayers passed a housing bond, and that housing bond of $80 million was targeted specifically to provide more affordable housing. And so that's one major way that the city can guarantee they provide affordable housing through gap financing, through working with developers by using city-owned land to provide affordable housing on site. But there are many other parties we work with, the Raleigh Housing Authority, there are low-income housing providers, and in some cases we partner with the private sector. So we recognize that affordable housing is a big problem, and it's easier if you get more density, you can provide more housing options. But the city is very committed to provide more affordable options. I believe we want to make sure our development process is quicker or smoother. The longer you take, the more expensive housing becomes. The more cumbersome it is to get approvals, the more expensive housing becomes. So the city is really committed to making sure they can move through the development process, offer that affordable housing bond so they can build affordable housing, and then work with their partners to ensure that they have more housing options so this could be a place where all can live.
And I'll just mention, and I have very little to add to that, but from the narrow perspective of greenhouse gas emissions, the same kind of actions that the city has been taking to expand its transit network and allow more housing around that are the same kind of actions that reduce our per person greenhouse gas emissions. One thing that we know is when we compare, say, the United States to similar countries across the globe, even at a similar level of development, we burn a whole lot more carbon than other countries do. And one of the biggest reasons is our cities are pretty spread out and we rely more on driving. So the more that we can do to provide other options to get around than driving, the lower those per person emissions get. And even the buildings themselves, more dense mixed use places, the buildings are more inherently energy efficient. If you think about an apartment, it shares walls or ceilings with surrounding units. And so compared to a detached house, it actually uses about half as much electricity and therefore consumes about half as much greenhouse gas emissions as other housing types do. So there are really a range of benefits in addition to affordability, which I think is super key to our city going forward. The sustainability benefits often go hand in hand with those same actions.
Affordable housing, especially here in Raleigh, is a big issue as we continue to grow our population. How can we utilize our existing infrastructure in order to adapt to a growing population?
There are a few things that come to mind. One is rethinking parts of the city that have a low density suburban kind of fabric. And some of the reasons why are things are changing. So in full disclosure, I live in Durham. I don't live in Raleigh. But in Durham, a lot of these sort of mid 20th century shopping malls, other places that are very auto dependent that were tapped into a lifestyle of that era where, the car was a status symbol, being able to drive and arrive and park your car in front of the store was also a part of that. But it resulted in large parts of the city that when you look at them are sort of out of step with how people want to live now. So to be able to walk to places, to have mixed uses, to have open spaces. And so those particular places are getting looked at in different ways as opportunities. So I think looking at underutilized or other places that are within the city fabric are really important. I think in the city, there are specific zoning areas that prevent different mixes of housing and affordable living to occur. So large parts of the city are single family zoning exclusively. And it prevents, for example, the idea of including a place where you could walk to, do your daily business or meet in a third place and have coffee and meet friends. It prevents you from, example, someone who can't take care of a large yard or people that are older that require sort of a smaller place. It prevents people who live in different family types that require more flexibility. So there are policies that reinforce a type of building that prevents the kind of innovation that matches the needs of the current and the future generations that could create affordable housing types. And so there's a policy layer to it as well in terms of looking at parts of the city and how they could adapt to different types of living without having to radically alter the fabric around them.
One thing that I think is incredibly fascinating and a little counterintuitive is the differences in impact that spread out kind of drive-only places, the burdens they create compared to a more dense and mixed-use style of development, and how much more our existing transportation infrastructure can handle even without that much change. And to be specific about that, if you look at downtown over the last few decades, added thousands of new housing units and hundreds of thousands of square feet of office and other workspace. And yet on many of the downtown streets, the traffic volumes haven't changed. And that's because in those kind of environments, people are less likely to drive. Other trips are more viable. The driving trips are shorter and we travel less. And so we see that pattern repeated again and again, and it's pretty similar in North Hills as well. That has changed radically over the last few decades, and I think there were a lot of perceptions that would completely overwhelm the transportation network. And that's not to say that there haven't been some impacts and some need for infrastructure upgrades, but I believe it's a lot less than people thought. And we know, again, for sure, that some of those roads don't necessarily carry more vehicles than they used to. It's because people are getting around in different ways than they did when things were more spread out.
In regards to urban planning, is there factors determining the infrastructure like roads, cities, and traffic lights?
Well, almost every city has what they call a comprehensive plan, or what I call a blueprint for growth. Essentially, you start with a map and you look at your growth centers, where you expect to grow. In the case of Raleigh, there's downtown, there's midtown, there's West Raleigh, because right now Lenovo Center is looking to put up $1 billion investment. There's the Briar Creek area. So you have these growth centers, and then you have these corridors where you expect a lot more intensity. Could be bike facilities, could be bus rapid transit. And once you have that framework, Raleigh has 8 growth centers and 12 multimodal corridors. That's where you know the growth is going to go, not in these low density subdivisions. And then that allows you to say, okay, in order to handle this growth, how wide should the streets be? Should this be a route for buses or bus rapid transit? Can we put bike lanes on it? Do we need more sidewalks? So once you know where the growth is going to go, that's why I like to call it a blueprint for growth, everything else starts to fall in place. When you have more residential, you want to have more shopping. You want to have more professional services, but then you need more schools. So it's kind of like a Sim City in real time, but you have to start with a framework to know exactly where you're going to grow. It's a predictable pattern, and then everything else falls in place. So that's really called the comprehensive plan. Most states require you to have a comprehensive plan so you can manage that growth so it doesn't happen haphazard or ad hoc. You can direct now the development community, you can submit an application, is consistent with our blueprint or inconsistent, but all that is thought about up front. And then there's the stormwater, because when it rains, you want it to be collected somewhere and not flood your city. So all that really involves planning, landscape architecture, civil engineering, so you're able to have that blueprint and plan for that growth that you expect.
Thank you for joining us. For more information, visit emergingissues.org.
This has been a presentation from the Institute for Emerging Issues at North Carolina State University. To learn more, please visit us at emergingissues.org.